Hello everyone, my name is Dawn Robinson and I work for the Alzheimer Society of Peel. And today I'm going to do the presentation component about the A's of dementia. So we're going to dive right in and I'll give you some definitions and along the way give you some strategies and tips to work with an individual who may be experiencing that particular A. So we'll start with this quote: "They will never forget how you make them feel." We often hear people worried about the client, what they say, what they do. The most important part in all of this is remembering the person will forget your name and the person will forget the organization that you work for, but what really sticks is how you make that person feel. So I really want you to keep that in mind today as we go through the A's of dementia. So I'm going to show you a slide and I'm going to give you about 10 seconds to look at that slide. I don't want you to have any paper or a pen nearby. You have to use your memory to try and remember as many of the 10 pictures as you can. And then we'll come back to that slide a little bit later. So on the count of 3, I'm going to give you 10 seconds. 1, 2, 3. Okay, we'll come back to that a little bit later. So now we're going to talk about the A's of dementia. So the 8 A's. The first of which is Anosognosia. So we're going to start with the most complicated word of the day, but it's really not the A that matters. What it is, the most important part is really the behavior. So that lack of awareness that someone has a thinking problem. This client doesn't realize, this loved one doesn't realize there's anything wrong. They don't have any knowledge of the illness. They don't know that they don't know. You'll hear us use this quote often. The person doesn't know that they have dementia. They don't know that they're forgetting. They aren't intentionally trying to be difficult, but they simply don't know that they have a thinking problem or a problem with their memory. And because they forget, and they forget that they forget, they blame others when things go wrong. A good example of that is maybe losing an item. So the person has misplaced their hearing aids, their glasses. For ladies, it's often their purse, and someone else is in trouble for that, right? You took my purse. Where did you hide my purse? Where are my glasses? Again, not trying to be difficult, but this person forgets that they forget. So someone else is blamed for that. So some of the tips we have are simply avoid arguing. If you know where the glasses are or you know where the purse is, we're going to bring it to the person. Or maybe it's easier to have a look together. We can all recognize that we forget things sometimes or that we lose items. So why don't we just avoid arguing instead of telling the person that, well, of course you lost something. You have trouble with your memory. The client truly doesn't believe that they have any trouble with their memory. So telling the person, reminding the person isn't going to get us anywhere. And I'm sure you've heard the saying, you'll never win an argument with a person with dementia. So keep this in mind. Okay? Normalize the assistance, offer help as if it was temporary. So for the client who might refuse to take a shower, right? Think about when that person tells you that they had one this morning or they had one yesterday, they truly believe that is the case. They truly believe that they showered this morning or they showered yesterday. So normalize that assistance. Just say, oh, I do this for everybody. Or, you know what, just let me help you. Just pick out your clothes and then I'll leave you be. Or really just talk about the steps involved. I'll just get the towel for you and encourage the person to accept the support that way. Our next A is one I'm sure you're very familiar with, amnesia. So it's exactly what you think it is. It's trouble with the person's memory. So the person may not remember recent conversations, comments, or questions. So they truly forget that you had the conversation about COVID-19 this morning or 5 minutes ago. The description we often give to people to really make this definition make sense is we talk about our memories being like a filing cabinet. So what happens is, our earliest memories are usually around age 5 or 6, And those memories are filed in this memory cabinet that is our life, our memories. So that first memory is filed first. And over the years, those papers continue to be filed in that cabinet. Unfortunately, when a person experiences dementia, when they experience trouble with memory or amnesia, those memories stop being filed. And eventually, some of those filed memories start to float out the window. So when the client is asked how old they are, and they actually respond that they're 25 years old, maybe they're 30 years old, or even younger than that, that's truly where the person believes they are, because the memories have floated out the window and the person believes that they're that young age. Or the person forgets what they've had for breakfast, and maybe they come and ask you for breakfast and you think, I just served you breakfast. I just got you a cup of coffee. The person truly forgets that they just had breakfast or had that cup of coffee. So what do? Maybe we get the person a little bit more breakfast, something small, a small snack to eat, because they might actually be hungry. Or maybe we actually change the subject. We say, oh, are you still hungry? But then we start talking about something else, engaging in another conversation and distract and go somewhere from there, right? Some other help might be some gentle cues and reminders. Maybe we just give the person that little bit of support, right? Or we treat all repetitions as if they were the first time. So for the person, that is actually the first time. It feels like it is the first time that they've said that. For us, it may be the 10th or the 20th time we've heard that question or heard that story, but actually for the person, it is the first time. And a great thing to do is to reminisce about the distant past, because as I said with the filing cabinet, those memories, those first memories, those memories up to the age that the client thinks they are intact. So we're going to talk about those things that the person holds close, those very strong memories, because often those memories that are held on to are the memories of those most significant events in a person's life. So go to the person's strength. Oh, here we are. So can anyone remember what those 10 items were? Something to think about. Right? I told you that I would be asking you later about those 10 items. But when I showed the other slides that interrupted your train of thought, could you still recall the items? Or did that make things more complicated? I just want you to keep this in mind when you think about some of our clients and loved ones, the person with dementia. Here they are. Great. So we'll go to our next A, agnosia. So trouble recognizing people, objects, and places, and other items as well. So it's also the loss of recognition of sensory information. So any of our senses, sight, sound, taste, touch, or smell, or a misinterpretation of what is being seen or heard. So an example we often give in this case is talking about a person. So my son might come and visit me in my long-term care home, and I think that he's actually my husband. Why would that be? Well, lots of reasons. My son no doubt bears a striking resemblance to my husband, and also if my son is 40, maybe 50 years old at that time, that's who I think my husband would be, not that lovely older gentleman who comes to visit me, because if I think I'm 50 years old, I'm certainly not married to that 80-year-old man. I'm married to this handsome young man. It makes sense when we think about it that way. Another area where we really find that agnosia plays a strong role is around mirrors. So we might have a client who engages with someone in the mirror. They don't recognize the person in the mirror as themselves, but the person in the mirror is nice. They engage. They're able to have a pleasant conversation. The other side of this might be that actually the person in the mirror disturbs the client, disturbs your loved one. They're wondering what's going on. That person seems to be watching them. I've actually had a client who physically responded to the mirror. He actually punched and kicked the mirror because he thought that person was actually breaking into his home. So he clearly did not recognize his own image, and he felt his family were in danger and he was protecting them. So mirrors are very an interesting concept, and we have some interesting experiences when it comes to mirrors and individuals with dementia. I just want to give one more example. We see this play out so strongly when it comes to our loved ones and our clients with dementia. We also find that individuals misinterpret objects. So consider your washroom vanity. So you open the drawer in your vanity, and as soon as I give this example, I always visualize my vanity drawer, and I think of all the different things that are in there, particularly thinking of the tubes that are in there. How many things in your vanity drawer are in a tube? I have eye cream. I'm thinking about the toothpaste that's in there. For some people, there might be like Voltaren or even hemorrhoid cream. And if something's in a tube and I need to put toothpaste on my toothbrush, I might misinterpret what's in one of those tubes and put that preparation H on my toothbrush. So no wonder we see responsive behavior or issues in the community when it comes to sometimes safety around objects or a misuse of objects, because there are so many things in our home that have a similar look, but the person misinterprets what is actually in that tube or what that object is actually for. So what are we going to do? Well, I'm going to jump right to in terms of identifying objects. What we're going to do is we're actually going to either eliminate what's in that drawer. Perhaps we're going to actually put the toothpaste on the toothbrush for our client or our loved one and hand it to them to ensure we reduce some of those risks. So really being aware of some of those safety precautions, but really identify that object. You know, Mom, this is your toothbrush, or here is your toothbrush. Right? We can introduce ourselves, so not in a challenging way. Not that we're trying to test the person. We don't ask them, you know, do you know who I am? We're actually going to go in and say, hey, Mom, it's me, Dawn. It's so good to see you. Right? And chances are my mom will forget my name perhaps sometime during the visit or maybe misinterpret me, but we're giving her that chance. We're giving her that opportunity. We're educating her at the very beginning. The other thing we talk about is gestures, right? Making sure, so if someone hands me the toothbrush, maybe they actually show me how to get started, what that object is for. So, Mom, here's your toothbrush, and we actually demonstrate for her what the use of that is. So we're giving her really the strongest support we can to carry out this task successfully. Our next A is aphasia. So again, this is one that people are often very familiar with, trouble using and understanding language. It could be both speech and comprehension. So I may really struggle to express my words, but I can comprehend what you're saying, or vice versa, right? So thinking about that for our clients, both may be impacted, or it may impact one or the other. We often find that clients struggle with word finding. So that's often one of the first symptoms when it comes to aphasia, is that really struggling, getting stuck on a word. You know what I'm trying to say. I'm thinking of, I just can't fill in that blank. Or we often hear a lot of clients say, that thing over there. You know, that thing. Right? We often hear that kind of description. We may find that our clients or our loved ones start withdrawing from conversations because they can no longer keep up, right? It's taking them longer to process, and that maybe the conversation's moved on by the time I've put together what I wanted to contribute. Right? And we often find that clients revert to their first language. So things happen slowly over time, but eventually, as the person progresses in their disease, we find that that use of English starts initially with word finding difficulties, and then the person will often lose their grasp of English if that is their second language. And also particularly if the person learned English later in life, as that filing cabinet, those memories fly out the window, we find that the accumulation of that second language also flies out the window and the person reverts to their first language. And again, as the disease progresses, the person will often have that same experience with their first language, have some word finding difficulties, and then really struggle to communicate in a language at all when they have very advanced illness. So what are we going to do to support this client? We have many, many tips when it comes to aphasia. We want to make sure we speak slowly and speak clearly. And actually, as it says in the third point, we're going to try and limit some of our words, our thoughts. We're not going to use long, drawn-out sentences with many instructions. Try and keep those instructions to a minimum. One instruction at a time, phrased very simply. We won't say, Dawn, go over there and get your shirt. It's your favorite shirt. You know, it's the red one. It's the one that you like. You can wear that today. We're going to say, Dawn, here's your shirt. Right? Keep it very short and simple. One other really, really important thing to remember is give enough time for the client to respond. For a person with dementia, research says it can take a minimum, often more time, of 20 seconds for the person to process the information that has been given, and an additional 20 seconds to formulate and give their response. So what we really want to do is make sure when we give that simple instruction, and also we give that visual prompt, we give enough time for the person to process and give us their response. And my words of advice are, if you feel you've given enough time, wait another 10 to 20 seconds. Because for us, when we're waiting, that time seems like an eternity. But for our client or our loved one, it truly takes that long to process and respond. I've had the experience where I've given an instruction to a person with dementia and then moved on to the next thing. I actually moved in the room to do something else, and the person all of a sudden came out with a response, much to my surprise. So I thought I'd given enough time, but actually I hadn't, and the person was able to comprehend and verbalize their response. I simply hadn't given enough time for that process to take place. The other thing is, when we use keywords from the person's first language, again, that first language stays longer. It's in that long-term memory. The person is able to maintain that language longer. Also, when we give it a try, when we try and use maybe even just simple words from the person's first language, it could be hello, it could be thank you, anything like that, it also helps build that rapport with the client. I think we've all probably had someone maybe laugh at us when we try and use a language that we're not familiar with. The person laughs at our pronunciation, but actually it really helps build that rapport with the client. The other thing, we're very lucky in this generation to have such fantastic technology to support us in engaging and communicating with clients, because I know Google Translate is not perfect, but actually it can really come in handy. And even sometimes we rely on a more traditional way of communicating with our clients by using communication cards with that picture of whatever the object is and the word in the person's language written phonetically, so we can try and pronounce that properly, and also written in the person's language, so if they're able to read, it has all of those different components in order to support us to cue the person. Many, many resources that we can rely on. Then we have trouble with purposeful movement, so apraxia. So it's not that the person can't do it. Often in this case, it's initiation that's difficult. I just can't get started, right? I have difficulty directing my body parts to do familiar tasks, getting dressed, eating. We often see apraxia playing a strong role, being an impairment for people in that kind of setting. And also difficulty understanding directions, up and down, back and front, or left and right. So what we're going to do to support a client is actually give more detailed instruction. So we're going to give one step at a time, but we're also going to use our nonverbal communication cues. We're going to maybe touch that person's arm. When we say, put this arm through the sleeve, as opposed to saying right or left, up and down. So we're going to verbalize what it is, this arm, and touch that body part so the person can make that connection in order to get that prompt started. The other thing, maybe I'm thinking about a resident maybe in long-term care or in a retirement home where we say, your room is just down the hall. It's the second one from the end on the right. First of all, that's a lot of instructions. And second of all, the client probably or may have lost some ability to recognize where, right, left, down the hall. These instructions, it's too much and the person isn't able to identify where that room location is. So we'd be better to take the opportunity to take the client back to the room and identify that room. Here's your room, here's your memory box, here's your name on the door. And we often have to do this a number of times, but you often do find after a period of time, the person is then able to find their room. But if we point down the hall and direct to the right, that often won't resonate with a client with dementia. Our next A is apathy, so that lack of motivation and initiation. So I just, in this case, can't get going. A loss of drive or reduced or no initiation of activity. And you will probably see a change in my affect. There's probably less or no emotional response. And I'm a very animated kind of person. So if you notice that, you're going to know there's something happening here, right? I'm not giving you that same facial expression, that same emotional response that I did previously. I just can't get started. So this is not a client with depression. This is quite different. So the person with depression, when I get the client up and going and I take them to an activity that they usually enjoy, there's no engagement. There's no enjoyment in that activity. Right? Versus my client with apathy, once I'm able to motivate them and get them up and moving and they go to the activity that they enjoy, they do appreciate it, they do engage, they do participate. So just a few differences to keep in mind. So one really important component of apathy for me is remembering, what does the person like? Who is this client? What motivates them? So as it says at the beginning, keep in mind who the person is. So you might think that I'm apathetic because every time you invite me to the craft program or you bring me to the craft program, I don't really enjoy myself. But actually, to be honest, I'm not a person who enjoys crafts now. So if you ask me to go to the program and I say no, I genuinely really don't want to go. But if you try and motivate me or engage me in watching the Blue Jay game, that you're going to have much more success. And the best way to phrase this to me is not to say, if I'm apathetic, it's not to say, Dawn, would you like to? Let me know, direct me. Dawn, there's a Blue Jay game on. Let's go watch it together. Be direct in those instructions, right? Again, remembering what it is that I like. The other thing is, in terms of motivation, you might find this is really helpful as well in terms of supporting the person in personal care tasks. So really difficult sometimes to get a person up and moving in the morning, hard to get started, hard to get them to accept personal care, hard to get them to accept a shower. But actually, after the task is completed, the person is happy, they've enjoyed it. So what is it? How can we motivate the client? Is it coffee? Is it a particular kind of chocolate bar? Is it an activity? Is it a visit from a loved one? So thinking about how to use those to motivate the client, and also being more direct in our instruction, as I mentioned. So, Dawn, it's Sunday, it's time for your shower, versus asking me, would you like to take a shower, right? Being direct and using more closed-ended statements to motivate the client. Many, many things to keep in mind when it comes to motivating or supporting that client with apathy to initiate those activities. Okay, altered perception. I really enjoy giving descriptions for altered perception because I think that it's one of those areas where we often struggle because it's hard for us to put ourselves in the client's shoes. So the person is misinterpreting sensory information, which can also lead to illusions or delusions. So we may find that the client misinterprets that shrub in the backyard as a child or someone looking through the window at night. So this doesn't necessarily happen during the day. The person recognizes with the particular daylight that's coming through that that's a shrub. But then at night, they misinterpret that as being something else. So this is why I find this quite challenging sometimes and quite interesting, is because things change, things are flexible. We really have to put ourselves in that client's position to try and problem solve regarding what could they be seeing? How are they actually interpreting the world, right? The person often experiences that loss of color recognition and visual perceptions and loss of depth perception. So you may find that when someone's trying to climb up, or particularly down the stairs, up is a little bit easier sometimes, but down, how difficult it is for the person to find that next step. They really struggle with that depth perception, and maybe their foot hovers and they really need to feel around in order to find where they're meant to step next. One of the other things we find is in terms of the bathtub. A lot of clients, a lot of persons with dementia refuse to get into the bathtub because that loss of depth perception means the person can't actually see the bottom of the tub. So they hesitate to climb in. They don't want to get in. They don't want to be lowered in the lift into that bathtub because it looks bottomless, because everything is clear, everything is white. So again, stepping into that person's world to try and understand how they're interpreting things, how that altered perception impacts the individual. And if we perceive something, if what we perceive seems real to us, it can directly affect our behavior. So I'm just going to show you a few slides. I don't think a lot of words need to be said here. I think the slides speak for themselves. I won't say anything more about that. I'm sure that there were some of those pictures that really impacted you. So some of the tips when it comes to altered perception. So how do we change the environment? Well, some of those alterations might be, we make sure that, you know, when the sun is setting, we actually pull the blinds down because that shrub looks like a person to the client. So we're going to bring that blind down so the person isn't frightened by that shrub outside the window. It could actually even be that carpet by the front door that the person interprets as a hole, right? That's an easy alteration. We can remove that carpet or remove that rug so it doesn't impact the person the same way. And again, when I said it's very difficult to understand what the person might be seeing, so doing our best to step into the person's world. And we might try that at noon and we can't understand what the client, what our loved one is talking about because I don't see anything. It's only when the sun starts to set that that actually changes, that reflection on the wall looks like something. We often give the example of maybe even a tree outside a person's window. So in the winter, it doesn't impact the person because there are no leaves on that tree. But in the summer, when the sun starts to set or shines through that tree, it actually looks like bugs on the window for that client because of the movement of the leaves. Really tricky. Altered perception can be very tricky. The other thing I want to say is in terms of paying attention to color. So I've been in many washrooms for clients in the community, and everything is white. The floor, the garbage can, the toilet, the sink, everything is white. And then we find that families are saying, oh, he started to urinate in the bathtub, or maybe even in the sink, because everything to that person looks the same. It looks flat, it's all the same color. So we can make small changes, like even putting a rolled up towel on the back of the toilet seat, just behind the seat. so the person can actually see the bowl and know where they have to go. Or you'll see sometimes that we actually change the seats to a black toilet seat. So again, some kind of definition for the client, because when everything is white, it looks flat, it's very hard to identify and differentiate. So just some small things, some small changes we can make to help the person with altered perception. Then we have our attention deficit. So for this person, sometimes we find that the person perseverates. They really get stuck. They're doing the same thing over and over again. So maybe the person is pacing about the unit for the duration of their waking hours, right? They're just doing laps of the unit. Or maybe the person is tapping or singing the same song all day long, right? That perseverative behavior. Right? We sometimes also find we have difficulty shifting clients from one activity, one task to another. So it might be the client who comes to the dining room, but then they actually sit and you have trouble encouraging the person to move from the dining room after lunch or dinner have been completed. For me, I think it's really important to think about the risk when it comes to attention deficits. So is there a risk for the client who actually you have trouble getting to sit in the dining room to complete their meal because they're always up and down, or they're pacing, doing circuits of the unit, and you try and bring them into the dining room, but the person sits for 15 or 30 seconds and they're up and on the move again. So for me, attention deficits is really a conversation around risk. So for that client, if we can make sure that the food is ready when we direct the client into the dining room, that might be a very effective strategy. Or maybe we shift to finger foods so the client can then take that sandwich and walk at the same time. If we find that the client is losing significant weight, we're really concerned about their intake, then yes, there's a risk and we need to find some strategies. So thinking about some of those strategies I've just mentioned, could we maybe give smaller portions, and each time the person comes in, we make sure that there's something there, or having those finger foods, or maybe we have to talk about an increased, some supplements, something to encourage the person that way to have an improved intake. The other thing is sometimes when it comes to that perseveration, the singing, the tapping, the person is more at risk for responsive behavior from co-residents, because co-residents become quite agitated, anxious because of this repetitive behavior. So again, looking at that risk. So maybe then the client has to be brought into a separate area. Maybe we consider some other meaningful activities that may shift the client's attention, but really thinking about what is the risk, what can we implement. One other thing I wanted to mention was about the client who was doing a lot of walking about the unit. Again, if we see that person looking very fatigued, we're really worried about a potential fall. What can we do in that case? Well, maybe we actually even bring the chair to the person and see if we can get them to sit, even just to take a very short break. Sometimes we need to bring the intervention to the individual. Maybe if we have a meaningful activity, something the person enjoys, we can encourage them to sit for a little bit longer. So just some ideas around attention deficits. Len Fabiano said, if what you are doing is not working, then change what you're doing, as the person with dementia cannot change, right? The change is up to us. And it's really important, as we said at the beginning, in terms of the person will always remember how you made them feel. This is why it's so important to connect. Remember to connect, not to correct. You'll never win an argument with the person with dementia. I thank you very much for listening today.